Hello, welcome, my kings and queens, to the One in a Million show. Thank you for joining me and spending a portion of your Saturday with me today. If you are on Facebook, then you can already see what the topic is today. And the topic of today, it says, God already has it worked out. Again, the topic is God already has it worked out. Real quick, I'm gonna try to go fast as possible with this word because it is kind of lengthy just for the time frame that I have. But I'm going to give a quick overview of the book of Esther. If you're not familiar with it, I'm going to explain it, a China version of the Esther, and then please read the book of Esther on your own time when you get a chance to. For the last couple of weeks, it's been the Holy Spirit just really been telling me to read the book of Esther. I studied the book of Esther a few years ago, and I got something from it, but from this time reading again, it was just something different. So I want to share that with you all today. Quick overview about overview of the book of Esther is, during this time, the location was in Persia, and the king name was, I always forget how to pronounce his name, but it was Arsahas or something to that effect. Let me look at my Bible and get some pronunciation going right. Ahasuerus. For my saints, the older saints, y'all know how to pronounce those words. Go ahead and give me the correction on that. But that was his name. So during this time, he had a queen named Vashti. Real quick, he held a feast at this time, and he wanted to show off his beautiful queen. And for whatever reason, it doesn't state in the Bible why she refused to come down to the feast, but she didn't come. Further down in the story, because Vashti did not come, the king went to his servants and said, because Vashti didn't come, what do you think that I should do to her? Because she is basically embarrassing me in front of my guests. And one of his servants said, actually, what was his name? Memucan suggested that the king make a decree throughout the empire that all the wives should honor their husbands, great and small, meaning if they were poor, if they were rich, they should honor their husbands. So because Vashti did not come down to the feast, like when she was asked from the king, she ended up being dethroned, and then that's how Queen Esther came into the picture. Quick overview of Queen Esther is Esther was actually adopted. Her parents had died, so she was raised up by her cousin Mordecai. Real quick, let me just try to explain this. So Queen Esther, she was brought up by her cousin, and her parents had died. One thing that I love about this book is that it really shows how God can just change your life in a nick of a dime. She had no idea that she was going to be placed into royalty. She had no idea how sudden her life will change. And just like this happened during these times, it can definitely happen in these times. It can definitely happen in the times that we live in as now, how your life can just totally change and God can put you in a position to advance you. And that's exactly what happened to Queen Esther. So real quick, during the time of the king looking for a queen to replace Vashti, there were letters sent out during those times. And during that time, letters were sent out saying, hey, the king is looking for a new queen. Preferably, he wanted them to be young, beautiful, and virgins, of course. And they had to go through a year of preparation, 12 months, as it's specified in the Bible. They had to go through preparation of being beautified. Then they had to go through 6 months of preparation of using oils on them, which was called myrrh. And long story short, once that process was over, Queen Esther was favored by the king because she was a very beautiful young lady, and she won him over. So once she was selected and she was then pronounced as queen, and Vashti was dethroned, she was now the new queen that was in place. Keep in mind, when you read this story, you will find out that Queen Esther was actually from Hebrew. She's Hebrew, and she was now being a queen over a Persian culture. So that itself is very, very a unique situation. But the key to this is, at that time, the king actually did not know that she was from Hebrew descent. So now, going past that, that now Queen Esther is now the queen, Vashti is dethroned, and we have here a situation that arises where Queen Esther is put in a position to be bold and have to stand on faith, and have to be put in a position to where she is the only one that can actually do the things that's asked of her at this point of time. At this point of time, some things go down in the kingdom, okay? Some things go down. And please, again, if you have time, please read the book of Esther for yourself. I believe that it will encourage you and just show you how great our God is, and how he can just, again, change our lives in the nick of a dime. So now that she's placed in this, placed as queen, she now has, special privileges. She now has access to this king. And now that she has access to this king, she's put in a position to where she can ask him of things, and things will be granted to her. So she's able to use that privilege to her advantage. How is she able to use that privilege to her advantage? Well, there comes a time where there was a young man in this Bible. His name was, I don't want to pronounce his name wrong. It was Haman. Haman was, is to say, one of the king's servants. And there was a point of the time in this story where the king, it was culture to bow down to the king. Well, Mordecai, which is Esther's cousin, didn't bow down. And when he was asked, why didn't you bow down to the king? He said, it's because I'm a Jew. And, that's not in my culture to do that. So Haman at that time got upset. And this whole big ordeal just got out of control. And he goes to the king and let them know, like, hey, there's a certain group of people that's in your provinces of your kingdom that does not abide by the king laws. So with that being said, he's kind of pushing the king to tell him, like, hey, we have some people that's a threat to your kingdom, and I think that there's something that you need to do about it. Well, after the king hears of this, he then gives him permission to kill all of the Jews. Now, remember, kill all of the Hebrews. Now, remember, Queen Esther was of that descent, and he didn't know that at that time. So when she found out from her servants, like, hey, it has been a decree that the king has allowed for this killing to take place amongst your people, she gets distressed. She's like, oh my God, what am I going to do? So long story short, she goes to the king and let him know, like, hey, there is a decree going on, and if you read this story, you'll see how the queen, she had so much special privileges with this king. It was like he gave her everything she wanted, and the Bible specifies up to half of the kingdom. So if you read the story, you'll really be amazed of how she just had so much access to things, and how this woman, coming from being adopted, having no family, and being placed in this royal position, and God using her to, we'll get to that part, but God using her to do some bold and courageous things is really, really encouraging, because a lot of us may be placed in positions like that, where God is calling us to be bold. God is calling us to stand up and be courageous, even during the times with the injustice that we're facing. God may call some of us. It may be an Indian person, it may be a white person, it may be any person of the descent that God is calling to be courageous at this time, and use that person and make things happen. You just never know. But going back to the story, Queen Esther, she was placed in this position to where, and I'm sorry, I said Hebrews, kill the Jews. Now, she was from Jew descent as well. And once this word got out that there were going to be a killing on the day to kill all the Jews, Mordecai went to Queen Esther and told her, like, hey, you are placed in a position to where you can change this, and it says here in the New International Version, when Mordecai talked to her, he said, for if you remain silent at this time, relief and deliverance for the Jews will arise from another place, but you and your father's family will perish. And who knows, but you have come to the royal palace for such a time as this. So such a time as this, she never knew in her lifetime that she would be placed in a situation to where she would be the one that would have to be the foreperson to free her people of this. So what ends up happening is once she gets word from Mordecai, and he's saying, talking to her like, hey, you have advantage. You're the king's queen. You need to talk to him and let him know that he can't do this to your people. So, and it even states in the Bible that, in this passage, what's really interesting is God is never mentioned in the book of Esther. But what I find interesting is when she talked to Mordecai, she said that she advised him and her people that was amongst the provinces of the king that were Jews to pray and fast. So that tells me that she knew that there was a God. That tells me that she knew that she needed some type of heavenly move to go on her behalf for her to move. So with this story, what ends up happening is she was able to be bold and free her people. I know our time is coming to a close in about 3 minutes, but this story is just so deep, so you have to read it for yourself. But there were some key things that I've learned while reading the book of Esther. One was God has a plan for our life. As I stated, Esther didn't know that she was going to be, placed in this royal kingdom to where she was going to have to be helping her people escape murder, a mass murder. Number two, we are given divine moments to alter circumstances. As believers, there are no such things as accidents or coincidence. God had perfect timing, and God's timing was perfect in this scenario, because what ended up happening was she was able to free her people. Her cousin Mordecai, he was also advanced in the kingdom, and the person who was trying to get the Jews people killed, he ended up being hanged. So God has a purpose for each and every one of us. And another thing, a lesson that I learned from Queen Esther is that we have to have courage. In the book, in the book of Esther, it stated that she was like, I'll go to the king, I'll go to the king and tell him, even though it's against the law to go to the king and tell him this, I'll do it if I have to die. So sometimes you have to be willing to be so courageous, even if it means risking it all, that you do it because God has your back. Another thing I learned, that fasting and prayer brings clarity and hope for deliverance. And even though God's name was never mentioned in this book, the fact that she spoke on being able to fast and being able to pray showed me that, God was in the midst of all of this. And another thing that I learned, that God demands obedience. Had she not been obedient to being bold and standing for her people, then there would have been a mass murder amongst the Jews. Now imagine how she would have felt if that happened and she had the power to stop it. She was put in a position for her to stop the killing of her people. So you have to understand that when you walk in this thing with God, obedience plays a great part of how things will result and how things will turn out. But there is some advice that I do want to give, and I know our time goes so fast, y'all. Y'all need to request for me to have 30 minutes. But anyway, the advice of the day is, when you don't have an answer, remember that God does. So thank you so much for tuning into the One in a Million show, and I will see you next Saturday. God bless.